Blood is thicker than water, but apparently a $100,000 wedding to impress a rich family is thicker than both. My parents drained my entire $90,000 inheritance to fund my younger sister's lavish dream wedding. They thought I'd just swallow the betrayal. Instead, I gave them a wedding gift they'll never forget. To understand the magnitude of what my parents did, you have to understand the dynamic of the Harper family. I'm Chloe. I am 30 years old, an architect at a mid-sized firm in Chicago, and I have spent my entire life being the invisible, responsible eldest daughter. Then there is Savannah. Savannah is 26, a part-time lifestyle influencer, and the undisputed sun around which my parents, Richard and Brenda Harper, have always orbited. If I brought home a straight-A report card, it was met with a distracted nod. If Savannah managed to show up to school without getting detention, my parents treated us to a celebratory steak dinner. It was a classic case of the golden child and the scapegoat, but I had made my peace with it. I moved out at 18, put myself through college with scholarships and 3 part-time jobs, and built a quiet, successful life for myself. The only person who truly saw me for who I was, and who despised the blatant favoritism as much as I did, was my paternal grandfather, Arthur. Grandpa Arthur was a pragmatic, old-school man who owned a successful hardware business. When he passed away 5 years ago, he left behind a very specific will. He knew my parents were terrible with money. They lived well beyond their means to maintain a country club facade in our upper-middle-class suburb of Oak Brook. To protect us, Grandpa Arthur left Savannah and me each a trust fund of $90,000. There were strict stipulations. The money was locked in an account where my parents were named as custodial trustees, but they could not legally touch the principal. For Savannah, who was only 21 at the time, her trust would unlock at 25. For me, because I was already 25, mine was set to unlock on my 30th birthday. The only loophole was an early disbursement clause for a major life event, like buying a home or starting a business, but it required the notarized, written consent of both the beneficiary May and the trustees, my parents. Savannah got her hands on her $90,000 the second she turned 25. Within 8 months, it was entirely gone. She blew it on a leased Porsche Macan she couldn't afford to insure, a month-long finding herself trip to Bali, and a closet full of designer bags. My parents just laughed it off. "She's young, Chloe. Let her live a little," my mother, Brenda, had chirped when I pointed out how reckless it was. I, on the other hand, had plans for my money. I was turning 30 in exactly 1 month. I had been eyeing a beautiful, run-down Victorian duplex in the Wicker Park neighborhood. The $90,000 was going to be my down payment and renovation budget. I had spent years dreaming about this, drawing up architectural blueprints late at night, envisioning the life I was going to build with the safety net Grandpa Arthur had so lovingly provided. It was a Tuesday morning when my entire world tilted on its axis. I had an appointment at the Chase Bank branch on Dearborn Street to review the transfer protocols for when the trust officially dissolved on my birthday. I sat in a plush leather chair across from a junior account manager named Rebecca. She was sweet, tapping away at her keyboard with manicured nails, making small talk about the unusually warm spring weather. "All right, Chloe, let me just pull up the custodial account details," Rebecca said, her eyes scanning the monitor. "Account ending in 4,409, correct?" "That's the one," I smiled, sipping the complimentary bad coffee. Rebecca clicked her mouse. Then she stopped. A slight frown creased her forehead. She clicked again, leaning closer to the screen. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. My heart did a weird, erratic flutter in my chest. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my voice tight. Rebecca looked up at me, her professional demeanor replaced by genuine confusion. "Chloe, are you sure this is the right account number? Or perhaps you already processed the early disbursement?" "What early disbursement? I haven't touched it. It's supposed to have $90,000 in it, plus whatever minor interest accrued over the last 5 years. Rebecca turned her monitor slightly so I could see it. "Miss Harper, the current balance of this account is 14 cents. The entire principal of $90,000 was withdrawn via wire transfer exactly 3.5 months ago." The air in the bank suddenly felt freezing. The blood drained from my face, rushing so loudly in my ears it sounded like radio static. "Show me," I choked out. She printed the ledger. There it was. A massive, single-wire transfer of $90,000 sent directly to a joint checking account owned by Richard and Brenda Harper. "How is that possible?" I demanded, my voice rising in panic, drawing the attention of a security guard near the door. "They are trustees, yes, but they can't withdraw the funds without my notarized signature. I never signed anything. I didn't even know about this." Rebecca's face went pale. "Let me pull the authorization documents from the central database. Please, give me just a moment." 10 agonizing minutes later, she returned with a photocopied document. It was an early disbursement authorization form. It stated that I, Chloe Harper, was authorizing the release of the funds to my parents to act as an intermediary for a private real estate investment. At the bottom of the page was my signature, except it wasn't my signature. The loop on the C was too wide. The H was stiff. It was a glaringly obvious, clumsy forgery. Right next to it was the stamp and signature of a notary public, a man named Gregory Miller. I didn't know a Gregory Miller. I sat there, staring at the forged ink, a sickening realization washing over me. 3.5 months ago. That was exactly when Savannah had gotten engaged to Tristan Sterling. Tristan was the heir to a wildly successful regional logistics company. The Sterlings were old money, country club royalty. When Savannah brought him home, my parents practically drooled over him. My mother immediately began obsessing over how they were going to pay for a wedding that would impress the Sterling family, lamenting that they didn't have the liquid cash for the event of the decade Savannah deserved. The math added up too perfectly. They didn't just steal my money. They committed a federal crime to throw a party. I thanked Rebecca, took copies of everything, and walked out of the bank in a daze. I didn't cry. I was too furious to cry. A cold, sharp clarity settled over my brain. I got into my car, gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and keyed my parents' address into the GPS. The drive to Oak Brook took 45 minutes, giving me entirely too much time to simmer in my own rage. By the time I pulled into the sweeping, meticulously manicured driveway of my childhood home, I was vibrating with a terrifying kind of calm. I didn't bother knocking. I unlocked the heavy mahogany front door and stepped into the foyer. I could hear them in the formal dining room. The clinking of china, the shrill, excited pitch of my mother's voice, and Savannah's unmistakable, nasal laugh. I walked into the room. The dining table was completely covered in fabric swatches, floral arrangement portfolios, and gold-foiled invitations. My mother, Brenda, was holding up a piece of ivory silk next to a piece of eggshell white silk, looking deeply distressed. My father, Richard, was nursing a scotch, looking over a catering menu. Savannah was sitting at the head of the table, a massive diamond ring weighing down her left hand, scrolling through her phone. "Oh, Chloe," my mother said, looking up in surprise. She didn't look happy to see me. She looked annoyed by the interruption. "We didn't know you were coming over. We're right in the middle of finalizing the linens for the reception." Tristan's mother, Beatrice, insists on imported Italian silk, and it is just a nightmare to coordinate. I walked slowly to the edge of the table. I placed the manila folder I had gotten from the bank directly on top of the floral portfolios. "I was just at Chase Bank," I said. My voice was eerily quiet. It lacked any inflection. The reaction was instantaneous. My father's hand froze halfway to his mouth, the scotch sloshing slightly in the crystal glass. My mother dropped the silk swatches. The color drained from her perfectly Botoxed face. Savannah, however, didn't look up from her phone immediately. "I went to check on my trust," I continued, making eye contact with my father. "The $90,000 Grandpa Arthur left me, the money I was using to buy my duplex next month." Imagine my surprise when a teller named Rebecca informed me that my balance was 14 cents. Silence hung in the room, thick and suffocating. "Chloe, honey," my father started, using his deep, placating businessman voice. He stood up, clearing his throat. "Let's all just calm down. We were going to talk to you about this." "Talk to me?" I repeated, my voice finally rising, cracking like a whip across the room. You were going to talk to me about forging my signature on a legal document and stealing $90,000 from my bank account? Don't use the word steal, Chloe. That's incredibly dramatic, my mother snapped, instantly going on the defensive. It was her classic maneuver, attack when cornered. We didn't steal anything. We repurposed family funds for an emergency. An emergency? I laughed, a harsh, dry sound that scraped my throat. I gestured wildly at the wedding magazines and fabric swatches. This is an emergency? Savannah's wedding? Savannah finally put her phone down and glared at me. Yes, Chloe, it is an emergency. Do you have any idea who the Sterlings are? Tristan's family practically owns half of the North Shore. Beatrice Sterling expected us to book the botanical gardens and hire a Michelin star caterer. We couldn't look like white trash peasants. Mom and Dad didn't have the cash on hand. So you stole mine! I screamed, slamming my hands on the table, making the fine china rattle. Savannah got her $90,000, and she blew it on designer garbage and vacations. And because she has zero self-control, I have to sacrifice my future so she can have ice sculptures and imported Italian silk? You're being completely selfish, my mother said, crossing her arms. The sheer audacity of her statement actually made me dizzy. Look at you, Chloe. You make a fantastic salary at the architecture firm. You're single. You don't have a boyfriend, let alone a fiancé. You're practically a spinster. You don't need a massive wedding fund right now. It wasn't a wedding fund. It was my house. A house you can afford to put a smaller down payment on, my father interjected smoothly. Look, Chloe, consider it a loan to the family. Once the wedding is over, Savannah will be married into the Sterling family. Tristan makes incredible money. We'll figure out a way to pay you back over time. Pay me back? I pulled the photocopied early disbursement form from the folder and shoved it in my father's face. You forged my signature. You found a dirty notary, Gregory Miller, whoever the hell that is, to stamp a fraudulent document. That is felony wire fraud and identity theft, Dad. For a split second, genuine fear flashed in my father's eyes. But then, Savannah laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. Oh, please, Chloe. Are you really threatening to call the cops on your own parents over some money? You'd send Mom and Dad to jail? You're not that cold. Besides, the money is already spent. The deposits are locked in. The venue, the florist, my custom Vera Wang dress, it's done. You making a scene isn't going to magically put the money back in your account. Just get over it. I looked at the three of them. My mother, looking at me with pure disdain. My father, looking mildly inconvenienced. And my sister, wearing a smug, triumphant smirk, parading my stolen future on her ring finger. They truly believed I wouldn't do anything. They believed that the unspoken rule of family loyalty, a rule that apparently only applied to me, never to them, would keep me silent. They thought I would just cry, yell a bit, and eventually swallow the massive pill of disrespect like I had done my entire life. You're right, Savannah, I said softly, picking up the folder. Making a scene here won't put the money back in my account. Exactly, my mother sighed, visibly relieved, picking up her silk swatches again as if the conversation was over. Now, we really need to focus. We have a cake tasting at 2 o'clock. I hope it tastes good, I said, walking backward toward the dining room entrance. I looked dead into my father's eyes. Because it's the last expensive thing you'll be eating for a very, very long time. I turned and walked out of the house. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently behind me, sealing my parents inside their delusion. As I sat in my car, I pulled out my phone. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police would arrest them, sure, but I wanted my money back, and I wanted to ensure Savannah's perfect, high society wedding crumbled into absolute dust. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name of a man I had dated briefly 3 years ago. We hadn't worked out romantically, but we had remained amicable acquaintances. His name was Harrison Cole, and he was a ruthless, terrifyingly effective forensic accountant and litigation attorney who specialized in trust and estate fraud. I hit dial. The phone rang twice. Chloe Harper. Harrison's deep voice came through the speaker. To what do I owe the pleasure? Harrison, I said, my voice steady, the tears finally completely gone. "I need to hire you. My parents just stole $90,000 from my trust fund through a forged document and a crooked notary, and I want to destroy them." A low chuckle came through the receiver. "Well, I do love a good family drama. Come to my office in an hour. Let's ruin some lives." The trap was officially set. My parents wanted a memorable wedding for Savannah. I was going to make sure it made the front page of the local paper. Harrison Cole's office in the Loop was a testament to his success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, dark mahogany desks, and an intimidating wall of leather-bound legal volumes. I sat across from him, sipping a glass of sparkling water, watching as his eyes scanned the photocopied early disbursement form. "This is sloppy," Harrison murmured, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against the forged signature. "It's arrogant. They didn't even try to trace your actual signature. They just scrawled something that looked vaguely like your name. But the real weak link here isn't your parents. It's the notary." "Gregory Miller," I said, reciting the name that had been burned into my brain. "My father knows a lot of people in local politics and real estate. I figured he just bribed someone." Harrison picked up his desk phone and pressed a button. "Sarah, get me a background run on a certified notary public named Gregory Miller, operating out of DuPage County. I need his license status, disciplinary records, and any known associations with a Richard Harper." He hung up and leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Here is the reality, Chloe. We can march into the local precinct right now and file a police report for felony wire fraud and identity theft. The police will investigate, eventually arrest your parents, and the state will prosecute." "But?" I asked, knowing there was a catch. "But the criminal justice system moves like molasses," Harrison explained gently, "and the district attorney's primary goal is putting them in jail, not getting your money back. By the time a restitution order is issued a year from now, that $90,000 will be long gone, digested by the wedding industry. If you want to hurt them, and if you want your money back, we hit them civilly first. We freeze their assets before they even know they're being watched." Within 48 hours, Harrison's private investigator had completely unraveled my parents' little conspiracy. Gregory Miller wasn't just a dirty notary. He wasn't a notary at all anymore. He was an old college fraternity brother of my father's who had his notary license revoked 3 years prior for, ironically enough, rubber-stamping fraudulent property deeds for a predatory lending scheme. My father, knowing Gregory was desperate for cash and morally bankrupt, had paid him $5,000 to illegally stamp my trust document using his expired seal. But the biggest twist wasn't the notary. It was the money itself. Harrison pulled my parents' financial records using a forensic subpoena attached to a sealed civil complaint we had quietly filed. When he showed me the spreadsheet, I actually gasped. My parents hadn't just spent my $90,000 to pay for the wedding outright. They used your inheritance as collateral, Harrison explained, shaking his head in a mixture of awe and disgust. The Sterlings expect a $250,000 wedding. Your parents only had $10,000 in savings. They stole your $90,000 to put down the massive, non-refundable deposits for the Ritz-Carlton venue, the Michelin star catering, and the imported floral arrangements. "Wait," I interrupted, my mind racing. "If the wedding costs $250,000 and they only had my $90,000, how are they paying the final balances?" Harrison smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. They opened 3 massive lines of credit and a second mortgage on their Oak Brook house, using the receipts from the cash deposits to prove liquidity to the bank. They are leveraged to the hilt, Chloe. They are sitting on a house of cards. If those final payments don't clear, or if the credit lines are frozen, the vendors cancel everything. I finished, a slow, cold thrill replacing the hollow ache in my chest. "Exactly," Harrison said. "We have drafted a civil suit for fraud, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty. We also have a drafted criminal complaint ready to hand-deliver to the state's attorney. But I suggest we wait. Let them print the invitations. Let them buy the dress. Let them get to the absolute point of no return. We strike when the collateral damage to their social standing will be apocalyptic." For the next 4 weeks, I played the ghost. My mother called me a few times, leaving annoyed voicemails demanding I stop throwing a tantrum and come to my sister's dress fitting. I ignored them. I went to work, finalized the blueprints for my firm's newest commercial project, and watched the calendar tick closer to the third Saturday in June. The silence made my parents arrogant. They assumed my absence meant I had accepted defeat. They thought I was sitting in my apartment, licking my wounds, while Savannah prepared to ascend to high society royalty. They had no idea that Harrison had already secured an ex parte injunction from a very sympathetic judge. The order was sitting in a manila folder, ready to be served, freezing every single bank account attached to Richard and Brenda Harper. The Friday before the wedding arrived, heavy with the humid, suffocating heat of a Chicago summer. The rehearsal dinner was being held at the exclusive Shore Acres Country Club overlooking Lake Michigan. It was hosted and paid for by Tristan's mother, Beatrice Sterling, a woman whose blood ran ice cold and who valued her family's spotless reputation above all earthly things. I wasn't in the wedding party, obviously, but as the sister of the bride, I was technically on the guest list. I arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, wearing a sleek, tailored black cocktail dress that cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage payment. Harrison was on my arm, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase. We walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of old money. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne and Wagyu beef tartare. Savannah was holding court in the center of the room, wearing a custom white silk jumpsuit, laughing loudly at something Tristan had said. My parents were hovering near the bar, looking incredibly smug, desperate to mingle with the Sterling patriarchs. "Showtime," Harrison whispered, pressing a warm hand to the small of my back. I didn't go to my parents. I walked straight past them, ignoring my mother's sudden, panicked gasp as she spotted me. I made a beeline for Beatrice Sterling, who was standing near the terrace doors, critically inspecting a floral arrangement. "Mrs. Sterling," I said, my voice perfectly polite, cutting through the ambient chatter. Beatrice turned, raising a perfectly arched, silver eyebrow. "Chloe, I must admit, we weren't sure you were coming. Your mother said you were battling a terrible case of the flu." "My mother is a very creative woman," I smiled thinly. "Mrs. Sterling, this is my attorney, Harrison Cole. I realize this is highly unorthodox, but we desperately need 5 minutes of your time in private. It concerns Tristan, Savannah, and the legal viability of tomorrow's wedding." Beatrice's eyes darted to Harrison, then back to me. Her socialite radar instantly detected a threat to her family's image. Without a word, she gestured for us to follow her into a private, oak-paneled library adjacent to the ballroom. She closed the heavy double doors behind us, shutting out the noise of the party. "I despise dramatics, Chloe. Speak quickly," Beatrice commanded, crossing her arms. "I apologize for the timing, Mrs. Sterling," I began, my voice steady, completely devoid of the trembling I felt in my hands. "But I could not, in good conscience, allow your son to legally tie himself to my family without you knowing the truth about who they are." Harrison stepped forward, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a meticulously organized binder and placed it on the polished mahogany table. "Mrs. Sterling," Harrison said, his tone all business. 3.5 months ago, Richard and Brenda Harper committed felony wire fraud and identity theft to secure the deposits for tomorrow's wedding. They forged Chloe's signature, utilized a disgraced, unlicensed notary, and stole $90,000 from a protected trust fund. Beatrice scoffed, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of alarm. "That is a ridiculous accusation. Richard runs a successful logistics consultancy. They are paying for this wedding." "They are functionally bankrupt, ma'am," Harrison corrected, flipping open the binder to the financial forensics report. "They stole $90,000 to pay the non-refundable deposits, and they have taken out a fraudulent second mortgage to cover the rest. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., a judge's order will go into effect, completely freezing all of the Harper's assets. The final payments to the Ritz-Carlton, the caterer, and the florist, which are scheduled to be drafted at noon tomorrow, will bounce." Beatrice stepped closer to the table, her eyes scanning the highlighted bank ledgers, the forged signature, and the sworn affidavit from the private investigator regarding Gregory Miller. As she read, the color completely drained from her aristocratic face. "My son is marrying into a family of grifters," Beatrice whispered, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. "Yes," I said quietly. "My sister blew through her own inheritance in 8 months, and my parents sacrificed my future to buy her way into your family. If Tristan marries her tomorrow, their debt, their fraud, and the impending criminal charges will drag the sterling name through the mud." Beatrice stood in silence for 10 agonizing seconds. Then she walked over to the library doors and yanked them open. She signaled sharply to one of the club's event managers, "Find my son, and find Richard and Brenda Harper. Bring them to this room immediately." Less than 2 minutes later, Tristan entered, looking confused, followed closely by Savannah, who looked annoyed at being pulled away from her admirers. My parents trailed behind them, my mother clutching her pearl necklace, a look of sheer terror dawning on her face as she saw me and Harrison standing next to an absolutely furious Beatrice. "Mother, what is going on?" Tristan asked. "The first course is about to be served." Beatrice ignored him. She turned her icy gaze onto my father. "Richard, I am looking at a forensic accounting report that details how you committed felony fraud to steal from your eldest daughter to pay for my son's wedding. I am also looking at evidence that you are entirely insolvent." The silence in the room was deafening. My father opened his mouth, stammered a pathetic, "Beatrice, I can explain," but no actual words came out. His face flushed a dark, mottled purple. Savannah whirled around to face me, her eyes wide with panic and rage. "Chloe, what did you do? Are you trying to ruin my life because you're a jealous, bitter spinster?" "I didn't forge the document, Savannah," I replied coldly. "You wanted the fairy tale wedding. I'm just showing everyone how it was financed." "Tristan," Beatrice said, her voice cracking like a whip, "the wedding is cancelled." "What?" Savannah shrieked, grabbing Tristan's arm. "Tristan, don't listen to her. She's lying. Chloe has always hated me." Tristan looked from his hysterical fiancée to his mother, and then down at the binder on the table. He wasn't the smartest man in the world, but he knew better than to cross his mother, and he certainly knew how to read a bank statement with a forged signature attached to it. He gently but firmly peeled Savannah's fingers off his tuxedo jacket. "Savannah," Tristan said, his voice laced with disgust. "Your parents stole your sister's inheritance? To throw a party?" "We were going to pay her back," my mother burst out, immediately incriminating herself, tears streaming down her face, her carefully constructed country club facade shattering into a million pieces. "It was a loan. Chloe is just being vindictive." Harrison stepped forward, handing a thick manila envelope to my father. "Richard Harper, consider yourself formally served. This is a civil suit for fraud, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty. Furthermore, a judge has signed an order freezing all your bank accounts, effective immediately. And finally, a copy of this file has been sent to the DuPage County District Attorney's office." My father took the envelope with shaking hands. He looked like he was going to vomit. Beatrice Sterling walked toward the door. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply delivered the final, fatal blow with the precision of an assassin. "I am going to walk out into that ballroom and inform our guests that the rehearsal dinner is over and tomorrow's ceremony is indefinitely postponed due to irreconcilable ethical differences," Beatrice stated, glaring at my parents as if they were a stain on the rug. "You have exactly 10 minutes to vacate the premises before I have the country club security escort you out in front of everyone. Tristan, come with me." Tristan followed his mother without a backward glance. Savannah fell to her knees in her custom white silk jumpsuit, sobbing hysterically, the illusion of her perfect life dissolving before her eyes. My parents stood frozen in the wreckage of their own making. I looked at the people who were supposed to protect me, who had instead viewed me as nothing more than an ATM to fund their favorite child's vanity. "I told you," I said softly, my voice carrying over my sister's wails. "I told you it was the last expensive thing you'd be eating for a very long time." I turned, took Harrison's arm, and walked out of the library, leaving them to drown. The morning of what was supposed to be the event of the decade dawned bright, clear, and utterly disastrous for the Harper family. I woke up in my quiet apartment, made myself a pour-over coffee, and sat by the window. I didn't have to guess what was happening in Oak Brook. Harrison had already sent me a succinct text at 9:15 a.m. Asset freeze confirmed. The dominoes are falling. At exactly 10 a.m., the Ritz-Carlton's Accounts Receivable Department attempted to run the final $65,000 charge on my parents' credit line to cover the banquet hall, the open bar, and the Michelin star catering. It declined. They tried the backup card. It also declined. By 10:30 a.m., the event coordinator was standing in the lobby, instructing the staff to break down the imported floral arches and pack away the Italian silk tablecloths. My mother called me 27 times between 10 a.m. and noon. I let every single one go to voicemail. I listened to the progression of her messages while I watered my houseplants. The first voicemail was pure, panicked rage. "Chloe, pick up the phone right now. The hotel is threatening to lock us out of the ballroom. Tell your pitbull lawyer to lift this ridiculous freeze, or I swear to God I will never forgive you." The 10th voicemail, around 11:30 a.m., was frantic bargaining. "Chloe, please. Savannah is hyperventilating in her bridal suite. The florist just drove away with the centerpieces. Tristan won't answer his phone. I'll do anything. I'll sign over my car to you. Just make it stop." The final voicemail, left at 1 p.m., was nothing but hollow, defeated sobbing. There were no words, just the sound of a woman realizing her entire world had evaporated. Beatrice Sterling, true to her word, had orchestrated a brutal social excommunication. She didn't just cancel the wedding, she ensured everyone knew exactly why. By Saturday evening, the rumors were flying through the North Shore country clubs faster than wildfire. Tristan posted a brief, PR-sanctioned statement on his Instagram, simply citing irreconcilable ethical discoveries and asking for privacy. Savannah's influencer career imploded overnight. She had spent 6 months posting daily updates about her lavish Sterling wedding, building a brand on the illusion of her new, ultra-wealthy lifestyle. When the wedding vanished, her followers demanded answers. When the truth inevitably leaked through the local gossip mill, the internet tore her apart. Her brand deals dried up. The leased Porsche Macan, which she had fallen 3 months behind on because she was relying on Tristan to pay the lease after the wedding, was repossessed from my parents' driveway 2 weeks later. But the social humiliation was merely the appetizer. The legal fallout was the main course. Harrison's civil suit was a masterclass in financial strangulation. Because my parents had committed fraud to secure the second mortgage, the bank immediately called in the loan. They had 30 days to produce the full balance of the mortgage, plus the maxed-out credit lines, or face immediate foreclosure. Of course, they had absolutely no liquid assets. To make matters worse, the DuPage County District Attorney's Office did not take kindly to local businessmen utilizing disgraced, unlicensed notaries to commit wire fraud. Detectives showed up at my father's logistics consultancy office on a Tuesday morning. They walked him out in handcuffs, in front of his entire staff. Gregory Miller, the fake notary, folded like a cheap lawn chair. The moment the DA offered him a plea deal to avoid maximum jail time, he handed over every email, text message, and bank receipt proving my father had orchestrated the forgery and paid him $5,000 for the fraudulent stamp. My parents were staring down the barrel of dual felony convictions. They were completely cornered. Through Harrison, we offered them a settlement to drop the civil suit, which would at least lessen their financial bleeding before the criminal trial. The terms were non-negotiable. They had to immediately liquidate the Oak Brook house and use the equity to repay my $90,000, plus $15,000 in legal fees and interest. They had no choice but to sign. The sprawling, 5-bedroom house where Savannah had been treated like a princess and I had been treated like an inconvenience was sold at a steep discount to a cash buyer. By the end of October, my bank account showed a balance of $105,000. My parents moved into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable suburb. My father, his professional reputation completely annihilated by the felony indictment, lost his consultancy firm. He eventually took a plea deal that kept him out of prison, but slapped him with 5 years of strict probation, massive state fines, and a permanent felony record that made it nearly impossible for him to find corporate work. He ended up managing a mid-tier auto parts warehouse. My mother, stripped of her country club membership and her social standing, refused to leave the apartment out of sheer embarrassment. The stress fractured their marriage, leaving them bitter and isolated, trapped in a tiny space with nothing but the consequences of their own greed. And Savannah? Without her trust fund, her rich fiancé, or her parents' credit cards, reality hit her like a freight train. She had to swallow her pride and get a job. The last I heard through a mutual acquaintance, the former lifestyle influencer was working as an assistant manager at a boutique in a strip mall, dealing with difficult customers for hourly pay. As for me, I turned 30 in September. On my birthday, I signed the closing papers for the Wicker Park Victorian duplex. I spent the next year restoring the original hardwood floors, updating the electrical, and designing the space exactly the way I had always dreamed. I didn't invite my family to the housewarming party. I filled it with friends, colleagues, and people who actually valued me. I never spoke to my parents or my sister again. They made their choice when they looked at my signature and decided my future was expendable. I simply showed them that I wasn't. In the end, family isn't defined by blood, but by respect. My parents gambled my future to buy my sister a temporary crown, and they lost everything in the process. I got my Wicker Park duplex, my $90,000, and my peace of mind. Karma doesn't always need a physical manifestation. Sometimes it's simply the undeniable, crushing weight of your own actions finally catching up to you.